In South Africa,
unless we have the maturity to say we can actually differ in what we believe, but we share a common commitment to make human rights work.
Getting to grips with challenges of democracy in rural areas.
We try hard and do our best, and I think we are on the right track.
And on this day 19 years ago, former President Nelson Mandela demonstrated his administration's commitment to cleaning up government. Well, good evening and a very warm welcome to Democracy20. It's a show in which we celebrate the achievements of the 20 years of democracy in our country. Now, South Africa comes from a tragic history of complete violation of human rights, this by the apartheid regime. Tammy Dixon now takes a look at how things have changed for the better over the last 20 years.
For decades, the apartheid state was engaged in a range of horrific and indefensible atrocities. These included forced removals to detentions without trial, as well as abductions and killing of people. All of this was in a desperate attempt to maintain white minority rule. Throughout the country, there are memorial structures such as this one here in Kwanobuhle Township in Utnik. Here lies more bodies of people who were ruthlessly killed by the apartheid government just because they were fighting for their human rights. Now, these centers stand as sad reminders of just how gross were violations of human rights in this country. The good thing, though, is that with the advent of democracy in our country in 1994, there's now a new culture of human rights in this country altogether. With the late former President Nelson Mandela in the forefront, the democratic government adopted a new constitution, the birth certificate of a new South Africa. Chapter 2 of the constitution contains the Bill of Rights, the cornerstone of the new democracy. It affirms and protects the civil, political, and socio-economic rights of all people in the country, irrespective of race, color, and creed. The 21st of March was instituted as the Human Rights Day. This was in commemoration of the 1960 Sharpeville massacre. It also serves as a reminder of the suffering and unnecessary loss of life that accompanied the struggle for human rights in South Africa. Mandela's government also established the Human Rights Commission in 1995 as a Chapter 9 institution to protect and assert people's rights. The Reverend Bani Pityana was elected as the first chairman of the commission. He says it helped that they navigated a new human rights trajectory with Mandela at the helm.
Because we could fit into President Mandela's agenda of reconciliation and nation building. The temperament of President Mandela, I think, was appropriate for us because he was very sensitive to unity questions, was very keen that the Commission must not function as if it is an agency of a political party.
As South Africa was trying to extricate itself from the morass of racism, Pityana says friction and tensions emerged in the Commission when they battled with new government policies such as employment equity, which was seen as reverse discrimination by some.
Unless we have the maturity to say we can actually differ in what we believe, but we share a common commitment to make human rights work. So, for example, employment equity became an issue. How do we actually ensure? Others, from a political perspective, felt employment equity was not acceptable, and some of us felt employment equity was an imperative of the new South African dispensation.
Over the 20 years of democracy, there appears to have been a growing awareness of what human rights are and the responsibilities that come with them.
We don't buy education, it's free. We don't pay school fees. So they must know that our responsibility is, if you are a person, you need a job, you have to stand up and go so that you can find a job.
Children have a right to education, and children have a right to have a healthy shelter.
But others feel that their rights are being violated.
Government must fix our houses because they are leaking, and this affects our rights to health because we get sick. kuba nathi siyachaneka, that's why sigula.
Ngakumbi thina bantwana bangamantombazana siyahlukunyezwa gqithi apha emhlabeni.
As young girls, we get abused a lot. We don't have proper houses. Some people don't have electricity and water. We're even afraid to walk on the streets because we get raped or robbed.
In the rural areas of former Transkei in the Eastern Cape, many learners still attend school in mud structures that do not meet even the basics of human rights.
There are hundreds of mud schools which are basically in the dark about whether they're going to receive any assistance. And this has terrible impact on teaching and learning at these schools. It's a gross violation of the learners' rights to basic education.
The widespread and violent service delivery protests also point to another worrying violation of other people's rights.
That is not the way to go, and we must find answers to the problems we have in a manner that is befitting the democratic dispensation we have.
There's also a growing concern over the excessive use of force by law enforcement agencies.
In recent years, it does seem like human rights violations are on the rise. It also does seem like those who are responsible for the violations of human rights seem to be able to get away with it with impunity. I mentioned Andres Tatane, the police. I mentioned the case in Cape Town recently. There seems to be a rise in police brutality, notwithstanding that there is an IPID, there's a Human Rights Commission, etc.
Vijana also called on the Human Rights Commission to assert its independence and be more visible in communities that are still battling with violations of their human rights. Tammy Dixon, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Now, every evening we've been inviting viewers at home to participate in the conversation of this special pre-election program. You can do this by emailing us your views. elections@sabc.co.za is where you can get hold of us via email, or you can send SMSs to us at 33726. And remember to begin your SMS with the word vote. SMSs, though, will cost you R1.50. For tweets, you can use the hashtag SABC Elections, and you can also find us on our Facebook page, SABC News Online. Your views will be shared, of course, right through the program as we get them, so that we make the program lighter, as well as you see at home that we do take you seriously. Now we move on to our next story. The past 20 years of democracy have affected even the smallest and most secluded towns in South Africa. Suurbrak is a village situated on the R324, this between Selendam and Berrydale in the Overberg region of the Western Cape. Since its establishment over 200 years ago, little has changed in some regards, but there has also been tremendous development in tourism and education over the last 2 decades.
This former missionary station is a quaint village, nestled in a narrow valley along the Langeberg Mountains, close to the scenic Trados Pass. Since the dawn of democracy, tourism has become one of the main economic injections for Suurbrak.
The lifestyle of the community in Suurbrak is simple and down to earth, and that's why people had to stop and see it for themselves. And the old historic buildings in Suurbrak is beautiful for them.
The residents still live a much simpler life compared to many other towns. But in order for the town and its people to thrive, progress in the form of employment, housing and service delivery is needed. Many residents say they feel neglected by government.
Things aren't what we want them to be yet. Our houses are a problem.
I don't see that anything has changed in Suurbrak. Things only change in Swellendam, Berrydale, but in Suurbrak, nothing changes.
While the past 20 years have brought about a democratic society, an increase in the availability of drugs has unfortunately tainted even the most secluded and peaceful of towns. Thankfully, progress and development in education over the past couple of decades counts among the success stories.
We are a small school, but every teacher here do their bit. So education improve a lot. So we try hard and do our best, and I think we are on the right track.
With most of the children's parents working as labourers on neighbouring farms, money is tight. To aid this dilemma, The school, as part of its nutrition program, provides the learners with 2 meals a day. A vegetable garden on the premises ensures that fresh produce is always available. Tanya Krause, SABC News, Sierbraak.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your views with us. As I said earlier, you can send your tweets, your Facebook messages, and already have received a couple. So let's take a quick look at some of them. This one says, yes, but still a lot to be done from the previous apartheid to now. We have achieved a lot out of transformation, affirmative action, employment equity, and I think there should be broad-based black economic empowerment. Needs to be fast-tracked. That one from Muzilanga, sent to us about 25 minutes ago. We'll move over to the next one. This one also from Twitter. No human rights are on paper only, rather. Very few people can exercise those rights through the justice system. Yet the government that makes the laws breaks the laws. This one from Kaiman. Apologies, I couldn't read the surname. They went by very quickly. This one from Rothwick, 64529. He says, well, not at all, as our police are violating the rights, the lives of their fellow brothers and sisters in the country. As we said, do send them in. We'll try and read them out as the show goes on. But stay tuned. Democracy20 comes back after the short break. We have our daily interview for you right on the show. Stay tuned.
Welcome to our Friday edition of A View from the House, coming to you live from Parliament. My name is Asanda Mbeche. President Jacob Zuma officially opened the National House of Traditional Leaders and calls on traditional leaders to work closely with elected public representatives.
South Africa is a much better place to live in than it was before 1994. Many of our traditional leaders can attest to that fact, having seen improvements.
A View from the House, weekdays at 2:30 on SABC News.
A devastating hailstorm in Pretoria and Limpopo has left hundreds, including pensioners, homeless. At least 3 people have lost their lives.
I'm devastated. My son was my only hope because he was studying and had been hoping that one day he would build me a decent house.
It's one of the deadliest hailstorms on record. Roofs were blown off and windows shattered.
We want the municipality to look after us because we do not have food, blankets to sleep.
That's Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Well, if you just joined us, welcome. You're watching Democracy20, a program in which we celebrate the achievements of the 20 years of democracy in South Africa. Tonight, we look at the benefits of a culture of human rights, and we now speak to the CEO of the Human Rights Commission, Kayum Ahmed, who speaks to us right now. Thank you very much, Kayum. Before we carry on, I think there's one thing we need to clarify. Human rights and democratic rights. These are things that I'm sure come through to the Human Rights Commission. People say, oh, these are my human rights. I deserve 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. And then there are democratic rights, which come with a responsibility as a citizen. Let's get that out of the way, then we can carry on with the whole aspect of human rights.
Absolutely. I think it's a very critical point. Often there's a distinction drawn between civil and political rights, which democratic rights fall within. And this involves the right to vote, the right to freedom of expression, etc. But rights, human rights, focuses on broader issues, which includes economic and social rights. So that's the right to basic education, the right to have water and sanitation. And so human rights covers both those elements, socioeconomic rights on the one hand, and civil and political rights, which captures the democratic rights that you were referring to.
And both of these obviously come with some sort of leverage, if I can put in inverted commas, having a democratic right does not mean it tramples on somebody else, but your human rights, although you deserve them, they also come with a sense of responsibility in some way or the other.
Absolutely, and I think rights and responsibilities are certainly interlinked and interconnected. So, for example, in South Africa, only 10% of South Africans have actually read the Bill of Rights or have had the Bill of Rights read to them, which I think is a huge problem in a country which is regarded as having one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. Having said so, there's also a responsibility on our part as individuals to familiarize ourselves with those rights, but also in turn to look at our responsibilities. So another fact that you viewers would like to know is that about just over 60% of South Africans are opposed to gay marriages, even though the Constitution
protects. That's a human right.
Absolutely. And so when you ask for your rights on the one hand, you also have to respect those through your responsibilities to other South African citizens.
I think that lays the groundwork for this interview now. 20 years in, have South Africans enjoyed fully human rights in this country?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I think that there's been significant progress over the last 20 years. Freedom of expression, for example, freedom of the media is certainly something that has developed significantly over the past 20 years compared to during the apartheid regime. So I think there we've made a huge amount of progress. The right to basic education has also been fully implemented. Nearly 100% of children now have access to basic education. But some of the challenges remain. The quality of education, for example, remains a significant challenge. The quality of healthcare in South Africa remains a significant challenge. So while there's been huge amounts of progress over the last 20 years, there remain outstanding issues which we continue to deal with as an institution. We continue to receive nearly 10,000 complaints on an annual basis on alleged human rights violations, which gives you a sense of the number of challenges we continue to deal with.
I mean, then you think those probably complaints come from people who know that there's an avenue to complain.
Sure.
What happens to people in rural areas who sit back and say, well, it's somebody who is in power, it might be the police, it might be... What happens to them? Do they enjoy human rights as far as citizens of the country?
I'm afraid the answer there is not a very good one. And the Human Rights Commission must take some responsibility for failing to properly ensure that people in rural areas, and particularly poor and vulnerable communities, are fully equipped and educated around their rights. And I'm afraid we haven't gone far enough to do so yet. But what we are planning to do is to engage with those communities. We for example, had water and sanitation hearings across the country where we engaged directly with rural communities, where we heard their voices, and those voices have in turn been carried over to Parliament in the adoption of a report that we recently formulated. So that's one way in which we attempt to engage with those communities. Certainly not sufficient.
Before I ask you the next question, we've already got a question from one of our viewers, and this one coming from Unati Jaif Khutpong, saying, how are they dealing with the people who are working on farms in terms of money and holidays?
An excellent question. We recently submitted a report to Parliament on farming communities, particularly in the Western Cape, where we had initially looked at farm workers, but also the rights of farmers. We have lots of complaints about farmers being attacked, for instance, and then, of course, a lot of complaints about farm workers who are underpaid and who are treated very badly. And we've looked at the situation holistically. We will be reviewing the report in the next few years. Clearly, our focus changes from year to year, but the farming community is certainly one of those communities we've paid significant attention to, together with the mining community in South Africa.
You mentioned something about service delivery protests. You know, those are obviously most of the time people are obviously protesting about basic issues, running water, sanitation, which are in a way a human right, constitutionally enshrined that they deserve these. Where are we in terms of, as far as the Human Rights Commission? I mean, you touched on the fact that this has been tabled back at the big house down in Cape Town Parliament. Yes. Where are we in terms of those people at home sitting back and enjoying something like that you and I take for granted? We fill a swimming pool.
Absolutely, and that's a fundamental point. I think we focus a lot on the poor and the marginalized, but we also need to ask questions about the wealthy in our society. Those with the swimming pools, for instance, and what that means when someone is deprived of access to basic water and sanitation. Our recent report indicates that only 64% of South Africans have access to basic water and sanitation. You will recall a case of 7-year-old Michael Kumapi, who fell into a pit toilet at school and died. His mother was at the launch of the report, and she narrated how she found him in the pit toilet with his arm raised, trying to obviously get out of the pit toilet, but at that point had already died. And I think these are the stories that need to be told so that people are acutely aware of the challenges we continue to face as a country.
Okay, our time is up, but I'm going to ask you one more question. You know, in your opinion, what is the biggest threat to human rights in South Africa as far as the HRC is concerned?
I think there are a couple of challenges at the moment. Clearly, the right to dignity is one of those fundamental rights, but we continue to find that 16% of our cases relate to issues of equality, which is race-related matters. Believe it or not, racism remains the #1 complaint that we continue to deal with. And very recently, in fact, earlier today, we had a dialogue on this issue where we determined that the issue remains a major one for South Africans. It's a difficult issue to deal with, but I think over the past 20 years, we've made some progress and still a long way to go, though.
Karim Ahmed, CEO of Human Rights Commission, thank you very much for joining us right in Democracy 20. Unfortunately, time runs out, but we hopefully will have you back sometime later on in the program as well, because we are going up until to the elections, and people would like to hear more from you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Well, not Sports Live, rather. That's the other program. Democracy 20 takes a quick break. Don't go away. When you come back, we have a couple more stories for you, especially what happened on this day 20 years ago.
You ask?
This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house,
as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
Welcome back. In this program series, we celebrate 20 years of our hard-fought democracy. The government of Nelson Mandela did not tolerate any suggestion of corruption. On this day, 19 years ago, Winnie Madikizela Mandela was fired from her cabinet post in the government of national unity. President Mandela announced the dismissal of his estranged wife as Deputy Minister of Arts and Culture, Science and Technology to a packed media conference at his Steenhuis office. Our political reporter at the time, Conrad Burke, filed this report on the 27th of March, 1999.
Winnie Mandela has never been a stranger to controversy, but it was in February this year that tensions came to a head in the ANC's Women's League over allegations of a shady business deal. A few days later, Mrs. Mandela practically courted confrontation when she condemned the government of national unity in a speech at a funeral for a Soweto policeman. The crisis gathered momentum when she left the country on a West African trip without permission and in apparent defiance of President Mandela. Today, the final scene of her career as a deputy minister in government was played out at Steenhuis.
As President of the Republic, head of the government of national unity, I have relieved Namzamo Winnie Mandela of her position as Deputy Minister of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology. This decision has been taken both in the interest of good government and to ensure the highest standards of discipline among leading officials of the government of national unity.
President Mandela refused to be drawn into the details of what was the final straw.
I must indicate that insofar as the ANC is concerned, I have no authority to drop anybody from the position in which she has been democratically elected. If the behavior of any member does not comply with our code of conduct, that's a matter for the disciplinary committee. But as far as the government is concerned, the position of a cabinet minister or deputy is not hereditary. I appointed the cabinet, and it is my right and prerogative to reshuffle the government as a whole or a particular department.
He announced that her post as Deputy Minister of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology would be filled by Mrs. Bridget Mbandla, a member of the ANC's National Executive Committee who had made her mark as a leading human rights lawyer.
Just a small correction in that report. That was actually aired on the 27th of March, 1995, done by Conrad Burke, though. But anyway, this is the end of the show. We've come to the end of yet another episode of Democracy20. We'll be back on Monday evening, 6:30. Another Burke follows up with the English news, giving you the sports bulletin. Simon Burke alongside Vabashni, as well as Peter. Cheers. You have yourself a good evening.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Good day and welcome to yet another evening of Afro Showbiz News. This show is here to bring you all things art and entertainment. South African film Of Good Report has opened at the London Film Festival. The film caused much controversy in South Africa when it was banned at the Durban International Festival in July. The International Comics Festival was held in Algeria for the first time this week. The event saw illustrators from all over the world come together in the capital of Algiers. Ghana pays tribute to poet Kofi Awonu, killed in the Nairobi mall attack.
That's Afro Showbiz News, Saturdays 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Who are we, you ask?
This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house.
As we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
Zoom into Africa. This is Libya. The chairman of the General National Congress is Mr. Nouri Abu Samen. Libya got independent from Italy on 10 February in 1947. The population is more than 6 million people. One of Libya's major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit, Libyan dinar.
With so many bad incidents happening around us, we continue sourcing, unpacking and televising nation-building and compassionate stories. From the nation's pride, those who go all out, top achievers, hard workers, those dedicated to making this country a better place, and unusual friendships. Catch all these and more on SABC News.